Hi everybody. I think we're going to get started just now. We're still waiting for Pam Duncan Glancy to join us for the keynote speech, but we'll get cracking just now anyway. So hello everybody and welcome to the Access Panel Conference 2022. So my name is Ian Buchanan and I'm the Equality and Access Manager here at Disability Equality Scotland. I'm joined today by my colleagues Morven Brooks, Emma Scott, James Davidson and Ali Bruce. Thank you first of all for taking the time to join us today, and if I could just ask initially just to kind of keep yourself on mute if that's okay. It just helps with background noise when other people are talking. So this year has been another really busy year for the Access team since we last met. We've been working hard to make sure that the Access Panel Network is representative for everybody in Scotland. We've been establishing new panels as well. So we've got new panels coming online in Inverness, in Shetland and Helensburgh and Lomond. And I'm sure you'll agree that this is a really exciting time for the Access Panel Network. We've also held our Access Language consultation event with Access panels and stakeholders. And that was so we could agree on what to call access audits, because this debate had been sort of rumbling along within the Access Panel Network for some time. You know, should we call it an access audit? Should we call it an access walkthrough, a lived experience assessment? So with the help of access panels and stakeholders from across the country, we went out and we surveyed them and had a sort of final consultation event. And we asked them, you know, what's your opinion? What should we call this? And panels resoundingly agreed that with their lived experience and with their expertise, that they should be able to use the term access audit just as much as anybody else should be able to use it, so long as that they've got those backup things behind them, such as the insurance policies that Disability Equality Scotland provide as part of our service as being the umbrella body for access panels in Scotland. We've had some setbacks though. The Scottish Government came back to us to say that they're not willing to take forward statutory consultee status at the moment in a kind of legislative framework. Even though panels really are really keen on statutory consultee status, and so is Disability Equality Scotland. We know that this is important for panels because it helps them be involved in making meaningful decisions locally. It means that local councils have an obligation to come to panels with new planning applications, rather than access panels and volunteers having to chase the local authority. We won't let this set us back though. We know that statutory consultee status is vital for panels, so it's something that we're going to keep pushing on over the next year, and hopefully we'll have a more positive update for you come the next conference as well. We've got a packed agenda for you today though. The keynote speech, as you'll have noticed from the agenda, will now be provided by Pam Duncan Glancy. We've also got a presentation from Susan Fulton as well, and we've also got breakout groups for you as well for you to feed into a kind of fairer recovery action plan that we're putting together for you. Before that though, I'm going to briefly pass you over to Morven Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, and she'll explain a wee bit more about what Disability Equality Scotland has done kind of on a more wider basis since the last time we met. So Morven, over to you.
Thank you, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone. Many of you here today will know who I am, but for the purpose of introductions, my name is Morven Brooks, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Disability Equality Scotland. So I'd really like to start providing a really warm welcome to everyone here on behalf of Disability Equality Scotland, to the Access Panel Network and to our stakeholders, and to Susan Fulton, who's an Access Consultant, and Pam Duncan Glancy, who will be giving our keynote speech just shortly. So thank you again for taking the time to join in today's discussion, and I'd like to thank Ian and Alistair for putting together today's event and agenda. It's been another busy year for Disability Equality Scotland, and with staff and access panels involved in making Scotland a more accessible place to live and work. So I just wanted to run through a few of our achievements over this last year. So we have been administering the Scottish Government's face covering exemption card. To date, we have issued over 167,000 cards to those who are exempt from wearing a face covering. We have supported access panels in new ways so that they can continue to deliver their roles locally from their homes during this time. And hopefully we'll be supporting you further as we come out of the pandemic and looking to help get back into hybrid working and face-to-face meetings. We've worked with ferry operators to launch the National Hate Crime Charter on board Northlink ferries. And we've worked closely with Police Scotland to design and develop a training package on disability hate crime that will be delivered to all transport staff signing up to the charter. And we've developed and started delivering our EasyV training courses this year. And lastly, we've published our manifesto for change ahead of this year's local elections. And we now have over 1,500 members with Disability Equality Scotland. All these achievements couldn't have been reached without you, our members on our access panels, who you all work tirelessly to give your own time, your own voluntary time for free to help make Scotland a more accessible place to work, live and visit. So today I'm really looking forward to hearing from access panels directly. We're going to be able to discuss your shared objectives for change and think about how Scotland can achieve a fairer COVID recovery for disabled people. This last year has proven that we can only succeed by working together, and that even though many of us are now working alone at home, coming together has never been more important. So before we hear from access panels directly in our breakout session shortly, I'm hoping that I'm delighted to introduce you to Pam Duncan Glancy, if she's arrived now. She has. Hi, Pam. So thank you.
Hi there, Morven, and everyone who's joining us today. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you. I just want to say before I start, thank you for everything that your organisation has been doing, and some of the things that you've just listed out loud just now, Morven, are incredible. And not only am I unsurprised at the hard work that you've done, but I also remain completely in awe of it, particularly through the pandemic, which has been probably one of the hardest times for disabled people, for carers, and for women as well, I need to say too. So it really is an honour to speak with you today. And I want to start by saying how important these past 2 years have been for disabled people and organisations like yourself. Before I do that, I should probably just briefly, sorry about that, introduce myself. I think Morven said earlier, my name is Pam Duncan Glancy. I'm Scottish Labour's shadow spokesperson for social justice and social security, and I'm really proud to be a member of the Scottish Parliament, and have been elected in May last year. And I'm proud to do that first and foremost because as the first permanent wheelchair user in the Parliament, I think it's incredibly important that disabled people are seen and heard in all stages of society, from high streets all the way to boardrooms and parliaments and back again. And that's why it's really important that we continue to do the work that we do as disabled people, to put disabled people in the room where things happen. And so I am proud and I consider myself incredibly privileged to be able to hold this responsibility. And I know that you were due to hear today from the Minister, Christina McKelvey, and I'm sorry that she can't, that she's not able to be here. So I hope that I can fill her shoes even a little bit with you today. This past 2 years have been something of what I think illuminated what of course disabled people and women have known for a long time, which is that inequality in our society is rife, holds us back, damages our health, and costs us economically. And when you look at what's happened in the past 2 years, we've lived like this for a long time. So disabled people have been locked in our houses. We've been unable to use public transport. We've lived in extreme precarious employment for a long time, if we've even been lucky enough to be in employment. We've lived in circumstances where it's difficult to access services like healthcare or social care, or to access transport and all of these things. Now the whole country, and in some ways the whole world, knows what that's like. And I think it's fair to say that most people have found it incredibly, incredibly hard. And I include, of course, disabled people in that, because layered on top of all of those things that many of us have had to handle for decades, we've also been through the pandemic. So I think we do need to stop and take stock and think about where we are as a society and what the pandemic showed. Now, what it meant for disabled people, well, so many of us lost our social care. We were stuck in our houses. We didn't see people at all that we would normally see. We weren't able to access the care and support that we use on a regular basis. Disabled women were put more at risk of domestic violence. Unpaid carers had to end up doing so much more work than ever before. They reckon now that we're up to possibly 1 million unpaid carers across Scotland. And that's people who don't, a large majority of them don't access social security support as unpaid carers. We've seen disabled people were more likely to be furloughed. Disabled people were more likely to have requests for reasonable adjustments rejected before the pandemic. And by the way, while I'm on reasonable adjustments, I'd like to see them not back a request for home working now as something considered an unreasonable adjustment, given that we've just done 2 years of it. It's amazing how we can learn to do things when we have to as a society. And of course, our organisations have had to do 100 times as much work as they've had to do in the past, with nothing like the resources and I mean the people power, the buildings that we're used to being in, the environment that we're normally in. All of this has created a really, really, really difficult time for disabled people. And the committees in the Scottish Parliament that I sit on, the Equality and Human Rights Committee and Civil Justice Committee and the Social Security and Social Justice Committee, have been looking into I've been doing inquiries in the impact of this past year on disabled people and on women, and in particular on women in terms of their unfair responsibility for unpaid work. So we know that this year has been really grim for so many of us, and our organisations, third sector organisations like yourselves, has, as I've always known they would, stepped up and stepped in like no one before, like never before. And they've done it in a way that, if we're honest, public sector weren't able to overnight. They weren't able to pick up that pace. They weren't able to reach out into communities like your access panels, like your organisations, like Disability Equality Scotland were, because they just haven't got that reach into communities that organisations like yourself have. And so we've learned so much this year about the position of disabled people, the position of women, the position of third sector organisations, but also how much nobody likes to be locked in their house. And it's on that point that I think we're now looking forward as we come hopefully through the worst of the pandemic into a better Scotland. It's that part that gives me optimism, because when you see that everybody has experienced what they've experienced in the last 2 years, nobody liked being stuck in their own homes and not being able to see their family and friends, not being able to do their job in the way they were, and not having the income that they were used to, not being able to go shopping when they could. So now they know what it feels like for a lot of disabled people, or they know what it feels like for a lot of people living in poverty, and people don't like it. And there's an opportunity there. There is an opportunity for us and for disabled people to say, you didn't like that when that was you. Well, this is us, and we've done this for a long time. We've experienced this for a long time. And that's why the fight for our civil justice, our human rights, has never been more important. And I'm really excited to say that over the coming 5 years in the parliamentary term, the next 5 years, there are going to be loads of opportunities, I think, for disabled people to really fundamentally change things in Scotland. And just some of those I'll outline briefly just now. First and foremost, of course, we've got the incorporation of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Disabled People. Now, the government introduced in their programme for government that they would do this, that they would incorporate the UN conventions that are not yet in domestic legislation. It'll be my job in opposition and your job in the third sector and in communities to make sure that we do that properly in Scotland, that we do it in a way that is not just like pin and jelly to a wall, but actually gives people rights with teeth that are justiciable, that we can hold people to account for, and that mean something for all of disabled people across Scotland, and that crucially improve the outcomes that disabled people face in Scotland. So we've got a big job to do, you guys on the ground and in communities, and me in Parliament to, and on the ground and in communities with you as well, and to take that all the way to the Chamber and make sure that we hold the government to their word, that we hold them to account, and that we get the best possible piece of legislation that we can, because these things don't come around often. And in particular, human rights legislation, if you look at the last time that we incorporated anything like this, in the way that they're saying they will, we're looking back almost to the Human Rights Act when the UK government, the Labour UK government did it back then. And so these opportunities don't come around all the time. So we need to seize that opportunity. And I would encourage you to do all you can to be as loud and proud as you can about what you need in that. Don't settle for anything other than exactly what we need to deliver disabled people's human rights across Scotland. And if I can help make that happen through what I can do in the chamber, what I can do in committee, and carry your voices into Parliament, then I will do that, and I'll do it proudly. There's also a great opportunity with the National Care Service that the Scottish Government have said they're going to build. Now, I have my own views about the version of the National Care Service that they're going to put forward, and it will be unsurprising to most of you to realise that I don't think it's going to reach the expectations that disabled people and people who work in the care service and the trade unions, for example, need it to. So there's a big job again for us in opposition and for you guys across your communities to make sure that we hold the government to account and that the National Care Service does indeed deliver for disabled people. It must be about delivering human rights. It must be free at the point of delivery, and that includes residential care. It must pay people who work in the service a decent wage. There's a reason why we've got a recruitment crisis in social care, and that is because we're not paying people properly. So we must address that. It must make sure that people can access not just life and limb social care, because we don't just want to get up in the morning, eat, go to the toilet, have a shower and go to bed again. Disabled people have a right to thrive, not just to live. And anyone who uses social care have that right too. So we have to make sure that legislation does that, but crucially, the money is there to back that up. And we've seen significant cuts to local authorities in recent years from the Scottish Government, and that will hinder progress on the National Care Service. So it'll be up to us, again, in our communities to make sure that there is money where the mouth is when it comes to the National Care Service. And I would encourage all of you to be shouting loud and proud at the council elections to make sure that your representatives are on that page as well, because that is also going to be incredibly important. And then the final thing, if it's okay, Morgan, if I've got the time to say, that I'd like to talk about is social security in Scotland. We have incredible opportunities again here in Scotland to deliver for disabled people and for others across Scotland in terms of social security. We have significant powers devolved to the Scottish Parliament in social security. Some may allow you to think otherwise, but we do have a number of powers on social security in Scotland that we could be using differently. And I know that disabled people across Scotland are impatient for change when it comes to things like personal independence payment. And the replacement for that, of course, in Scotland, adult disability payment, which pilots begin this month, as far as I'm aware. What are we in April? Next month. And people will begin to be able to apply for that. But that's been since 2018, we've had the powers on it. And so it'll surprise no one again to hear that I'm a bit impatient about the pace of change there. But the reason I'm impatient is not just because I'm having a fight for a fight's sake about it, but because disabled people are living in poverty. We're living in a cost of living crisis that we've never seen before. And we're still on the rates of benefit that have been determined by the DWP. And we're still on the system that has been determined that will determine who will access it on the basis of the DWP rulebook. And we all know that that rulebook is rotten. And so that is why we absolutely have to get moving on the pace and scale of social security powers in Scotland. And any opportunity I get, I'm sure you'll have seen, I say those things. And again, I would encourage you to hold the government to account on that as well, because this is important. It matters. It's not enough just to improve the process. Now, don't get me wrong, any improvement on a PIP application is a good thing. And let's be honest, the bar is currently pretty low. So we don't need to do too much to make it better. But we have bigger aspirations in Scotland, surely, for disabled people than just making it a little bit better than what the DWP do. We need to make sure that eligibility criteria has changed, that the 20-metre rule is addressed, that the adequacy of these payments address the real extra cost of being a disabled person, and that accounts for being a disabled person specifically in Scotland. And we need to do all of these things fast, because, as I said earlier, the cost of living crisis is biting, and disabled people are more likely to live in poverty than non-disabled people. So we need to get moving on that, and we need to hold the government to account on it. And there are lots of things we can do. We can start, of course, by asking questions and hustings in council elections coming up, and I know you guys have published your manifesto for that yesterday. which looks great, and all of those things are things that we should be calling on all parties to support. So do it, don't be shy, use your voice, shout loud and proud about why disabled people should be front and centre of every election and every decision that is made in Scotland, because if we get it right for disabled people, we get it right for everyone. And that's one of the reasons why your organisations are so incredibly important. And I think I'll finish there, if that's okay, Morven, and thanks everyone for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Pam. Really appreciate your time today. Ian has put in the chat if anybody has any questions for Pam Duncan Glancy. If you can raise your hand or unmic yourself and you can ask your question. Don't see anybody. Okay. What we'll do is we'll move on. If you do think of any questions after, Pam, I believe you have to leave just shortly, don't you? You can't stay for the whole event today. So if anybody does have any questions, please either put in the chat and we can pick that up later with Pam. We can email her directly and I'm sure you'll get back to us, won't you?
Of course I will. So I'm about to put my contact details in the chat. I'm leading the debate on the cost of living for us this afternoon in the chamber, so I couldn't stay beyond that contribution. But I'll hang about for 5 or so minutes. If you've got questions, ask me. Be very unlike a group of disabled people not to want to ask questions. So I'm happy to answer anything. But I'll pop out in about 5 minutes. But I'll leave my details in the chat.
Much appreciated. Thanks again for your time today, Pam. I'll pass back over to Ian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam. Much appreciated. That was really interesting to hear. Thank you. So yeah, if there's nobody with any questions for Pam, what we'll do is we'll move on the agenda. So up next, we've got a presentation, which is a sort of follow on from last year. Actually, it's a presentation from Susan Fulton, who's been invited back. So Susan, I think what Ali's going to do is going to spotlight you, and then you can, there we go, and then you're able to share your screen when you're ready to get going. So over to you, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. This will be good. Me and IT. We'll give it a go. We've practiced earlier, but it didn't really work. No, so you've failed again, folks. I'm terrible on IT. Right, I will stop the share. How was that? Can anyone see the full slide?
There we go, Susan. Yep, we can see it.
That's good.
Oh, that didn't take me too long. Thanks very much, Ian, and thanks very much. That was quite an inspiring speech by Pam Duncan Glancy there. Quite a task to follow on from that. What I thought I'd do today was look at the world that's been touched on in the previous speech about the way we worked in our pre-COVID world, and then how that suddenly came to an abrupt end, the way we work just now, and how we may want to see work in the future with COVID recovery as we come out this state. I've got the diagrams on the PowerPoint presentation. Most of them are sort of cartoon images. The image that's there just now is 2 heads and shoulders and a question mark. So I'm happy to take questions at the end, or if there's something I say you want to jump in on, feel free. I can't actually see any of you guys, but Disability Equality Scotland will manage whether you want to unmute yourself or put your hand up or use the chat, whatever's comfortable for yourself. Please feel free to stop me as I go along, but as I'm happy to take questions at the end. I think, as was touched on before, we quite like to gather together. We're social beings. We like to come together, sit around about a table, share our views and opinions, and access panels. Historically, that's the way that you met. The image on the screen shows a group of people sitting around about a table. I'm not sure whether the person's a British Sign Language interpreter or perhaps Makaton, but there is the facility there to interpret for the group. Someone has their white and red cane to indicate they're deaf blind. So access panels have been really good at that, about catering for everyone's differing ability and reflecting that in the meetings with designers. So you would have had your meetings in an accessible venue, you would have had access to an accessible toilet, maybe lucky enough to have a building with a changing places toilet in it, hearing enhancement systems, you would have booked British Sign Language interpreters, and one of the most important things, you would have had convenient start and finish times to your meetings. You would have realised that some people's care packages, they can't just, you know, be at a meeting at 9 o'clock or 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And if you lived in an area that you had accessible taxis, quite often the accessible taxis are given over for the school runs. So you would need to avoid those start and finish times around about sort of 9:30 o'clock times. Maybe had capacity to have a late morning start, and then taking into account people's needs, whether it was stamina or medicinal. Maybe individuals who are diabetic need to eat and medicate at lunchtime, and then maybe a follow-on session in the afternoon. So you'd maybe have sort of 2 meetings in a day, or one long term with breaks built in. You would most likely, as access panels, you'll have built up loads of contacts over the years. You'll have a go-to person in the council if you want to talk about transport or roads or street lighting, or if it was an education issue, social work, or if you were lucky enough to have an access officer in post. Or I know that some panels work quite well with health boards. You would have had that existing network and contacts. And then all of a sudden that just went, our worlds were turned upside down. We were in the house, these existing contacts were no longer in the office, they were working from home. You wouldn't have had their home telephone number or their personal mobile. Maybe you were lucky enough to have that relationship you had, but all of that just stopped. And then we sort of very quickly moved on to online meetings. The imaging screen is a typical view of someone's computer screen, where you see the head and shoulders of people at the meeting or a conference like today. And some stakeholders and organisations, it was a quick push to move everything online. And I don't know whether there was a realisation or a lack of acknowledgement that not everyone necessarily wants to be online, not everyone can be online. So there were quite a few people at the start of the lockdown who were kind of left behind. Perhaps they were shielding. So that network and support that they had, that day-to-day people coming in their house, completely stopped, because we were terrified of this virus and we were urged to separate and stay at home. So some people very quickly were able to switch to the virtual world. I wasn't one of those quick people, as you can probably understand, because technology doesn't come easily to a lot of people. Some people are really into it and understand it. And we again quickly realised that we didn't have to factor in the travelling time from Glasgow to Edinburgh to be there in plenty of time for the traffic or the train or whatever. So no travel time was needed to be factored in. So we went from having, say, 2-3 meetings comfortably in a day to maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 back-to-back meetings, and not building in comfort breaks, not building in sufficient breaks for attendees if it was a conference potentially, sufficient breaks for sign language interpreters, sufficient breaks for those who are operating the captions. So we went very quickly to that, and we'll have all have heard this phrase, "You're still on mute." Two and a bit years in, and we all still forget that we're on mute, and we try to chat away. So it's still a learning curve. And I think for a lot of people who were initially shielding, the support mechanism to get online came very late, and some people are still learning, and it's a confidence thing as well. Some people are not confident. Some people may live in an area where there's no broadband or no reliable broadband coverage. So for them, it's impossible to be online. So there's very different patterns throughout the country. The imaging screen is a sort of cartoon element, and it's a couple of people looking at the laptop sitting around about a table, and one person is looking at a large screen on a wall. It looks as if there's participants who are participating online, and there's graphs and figures on the wall. So as I said, we quickly moved over to the platform Zoom and Teams. I don't know about anybody else, but I'd never heard of those platforms before. I'd used Skype, but that was the only one. So online meetings need to be accessible as well. Like today, we have British Sign Language interpreters, we've got captioners, subtitles, etc. And I think in the early days, that accessibility for online meetings wasn't quite there. The platforms themselves did a lot of work to try and make sure that the platforms were accessible. So we've come a long way. As we move through, there's big changes this week. We no longer need to wear face masks, face coverings, although listen to quite a few people, I think some people are still going to do that. So we're emerging out of COVID in a different way that suits us. So as we emerge into the new world, the image on screen is a small globe of the world, and it looks like a child's hand round about it. It's this new world that we move into. Will it be hybrid meetings? Possibly some access panels have started back to meeting around about the table. It would be interesting to find out if you've done that. It'd be interesting if you've gone down the road of hybrid meetings. The venues may well be an issue as we move forward, because a lot of local authority and Scottish Government buildings have still not opened up to staff. A lot of staff are still working from home. So the venue that you would have used, it may not be available to you. So you're having to start again. Is the venue accessible? Does it have an accessible toilet? Does it have hearing enhancement systems? And really importantly, if there's an emergency, can everyone get back out that building safely? So you may be having to, Irene talked about access audits, you may be having to start to do these or look to do these if the regular venue that you had is no longer available to you. If it's hybrid, I don't think we can actually rely on IT. We need to do a few test runs, a few trial runs. For anyone who's taken part in a meeting remotely, if everyone else is round the table, and for example, you have to dial in because you can't attend, it can be quite a lonely experience, just sitting at the table with the piece of equipment, the kit in the middle of the table, because that's your only link to the meeting. So you can't get the vibe, you can't get the feel of maybe, okay, so Morven, I can tell Morven's just about to finish up, so I'll pitch in and I'll try and chip in or whatever. You very much rely on the chairperson remembering that you're there. So it needs to be a very good chair that remembers to try and include everyone, because you can't pick up on those cues that you would normally pick up on, body language, or you may be aware somebody's fidgeting next to you, whatever, all these different wee cues that we take on board. So it's important that everyone's brought in to get their opinion and their view. And it's very important to factor in sufficient breaks for the participants as well, comfort breaks. And again, breaks for sign language interpreters, captioners, things like that. Really important that we do that. In preparation for today, I know that a lot of you have got a very good working relationship with your local authority. Some of you work more with health boards. So I thought I would do a wee check. We've got, as you know, 32 local authorities in Scotland. And I thought that really good working relationship that you had, I just wanted to check if I did a simple search on the homepage of each local authority, and I've just simply put an access panel, what that would show me. So whether it would show me contact details for the access panel in that area, or whether it would be a news item or items, minutes, whatever it was. So I did a wee simple search, and I was quite surprised with the results actually. There were only 10 local authorities with that simple homepage search that flat threw up access panel. Highland Council, they actually went straight into all of the access panels within their area. Obviously Highland is a large geographic area, so it would give you whether there was an active panel for a certain geographic area, And if there was, it would give you the name, mobile number and email address, which I thought was really, really good. Other authorities, it would maybe just be a news item where the access panel were mentioned, or maybe minutes of a meeting where the access panel members had contributed. One local authority, I think it was Argyll and Butte. I think I had to keep clicking, it was about the 4th layer, before I could find anything in access panels. So I thought that was interesting. Given that relationship that you've had, I would have presumed that there would have been, the access panels would have been more to the fore, more to the front. Excuse me, I'm talking too much. So 32 local authorities, simple search, and the results were 10. And I think, to steal a phrase from Pam Duncan Clancy, don't be shy. So I think as we emerge from COVID, it would be to engage or re-engage. There's been a lot of changes in 2 and a bit years, and you'll know that yourself if you've lost connections that you had previously. Some local authorities have taken the opportunity to rejig departments, maybe rename them. I know quite a few local authorities have lost members of staff, because I think that the virus has affected people in so many different ways, and people have reevaluated their lives, and I know that quite a lot have maybe taken early retirement or chosen to move on and try something else. So it may well be that your contacts have moved or left or whatever. So I suppose the opportunity is to re-engage, and don't be shy and just ask. Offer to help. We've got the elections coming up, and it's potentially too late. But it would be interesting if there are any access panels who normally or regularly of the cycle of elections offer to just have a look at the venue and identify any barriers and provide advice and feedback to local authorities. Some councils change the polling venues from time to time. Some like to move it away from schools, so the schools are not closed down and get new venues. So that might be an idea to offer to re-engage. I don't know whether any of you have seen the film Marvellous. I thought it literally was a marvellous film with Toby Jones, and it's about a person called Neil Baldwin, and he achieved so much, and someone said to him in the film, but how did you do that? And he said, oh, I just asked. So just go, I would say, go back to simplistic terms and ask to re-engage or ask to re-engage, ask to meet. So it may well be there's a new chief executive, there's a new head of service, there's a new head of department. Just introduce yourselves, ask to be included, ask if you can help, ask to be kept up to date, and ask to be promoted as a group to engage and consult with. Because there's a lot going on just now, and you've got the knowledge and the skill set and experience, and people should be wanting to engage with you to find out what your views are. And I suppose ask to educate, because you don't know what you don't know. And you have the capability to do that, whether it's the Health Board, Scottish Government, local authority, whatever that happens to be. In terms of designing, I very much think that the images that are on the screen is white jigsaw pieces linked by one single red jigsaw piece. And for me, that's what I see the access panels are. The design team, if they're going in to design a new, say it's a new leisure centre in the area, they will certainly have the skill set, the expertise. They'll have maybe designed about 4 or 5 other leisure centres in different areas. They can bring that to the board. The local authority staff will have the plans, they will have the policies, and they'll have the local knowledge of that area. But the access panel will also have knowledge and expertise that they can bring to the table. So in that engagement process, if it's a new leisure centre, it should be about engaging with the people who go to the existing leisure centre and find out what the barriers are. And even better if you can actually tap into the individuals who don't go to the leisure centre and find out why. Is it because there's no ramp, or if there was an emergency the person wouldn't feel safe? Is it because the wheelchair hoist makes you like a spectacle, you know, a spectator experience. It takes maybe half an hour to get into the pool and half an hour to get back out of the pool. And it's just not for everybody to be like, you know, to be on show like that. So just finding out why people don't engage and then feed that into the design. Image on the screen is a pyramid shape. It just looks to identify the different stages of the planning process. The top of the pyramid is a national development. So that's maybe if, say, for example, there was to be a new airport in Dumfries and Galloway or some of national significance. The middle of the pyramid is a major development. So that could be, they've just redeveloped the St James's Centre in Edinburgh. So if it's anything that's got quite a major impact in people accessing that area, and local developments are something that's local to yourself. So development plans are the strategic plans that you'll be aware of that plan what's going to happen in your area and will zone for residential developments, for industrial areas or agriculture or whatever. Development management is the section that deals with the planning applications. So they'll engage with the architects and the design teams about the planning application for the new leisure centre. And there's also the enforcement wing to support that process. So if somebody maybe does something not as per their planning consent, or maybe do something not realising they need consent, then the enforcement team will support them to rectify that. The next slide is a chart just showing what happens at the pre-application or the planning application process, how it's actually verified and goes through the different sequences within the department. And if it's a major application that is coming into the area, there's a requirement for a pre-application process whereby the design team need to go out at least 12 weeks before they submit the application and advertise the project. So pre-COVID, it would have been booking maybe the community centre or a local hall. During the pandemic, those pre-application processes probably had to go online because there were restrictions about meeting and different things. So the pre-application is about telling people what's part of the application and getting feedback, what they like, what they didn't like, what they would like changed, and that all has to be recorded and can be submitted as part of the design and access statement that's submitted with the application at least 12 weeks after that pre-application discussion takes place. And as we've heard from Ian, statutory consultation is currently still only for community councils and not access panels. So if you hear about something in your area, that's one way that members of the access panel, either as individuals or member of the panel, can get involved, because these pre-application events are usually notified in the local paper, and because you really want as many people as possible to come along and attend them to get feedback. And if the design team realise the worth in it, if they can engage with as many people as possible and get all the feedback at the beginning of the process, it helps them inform the design. So not waiting until the planning application is lodged to get feedback. The next slide is just a question: how do we currently design in the built environment? And the image is just a booklet with design written on it, and there's a paint pot with paintings, a camera, a light bulb, a time, a colour reference for paint, that pencil. It's just a kind of cartoon image. I've showed this slide before at the conference last year. My sort of take, I think we're in a hybrid between these two. The images on screen are concept design is a head with sort of cogs and wheels coming out, a cartoon head. The detailed design image is plans that show a room layout. The next image is consultation. It's people standing about as a wheelchair user with bubbles as if they're having a conversation. And the conflict image is two angry cartoon men shouting at one another. So we come up with the idea of the leisure centre, and then we identify funding. So we very quickly get the detailed design done. the client agrees that they like the budget, it's fine. We then go out to consultation. And the consultees quite rightly ask for things because they're used to the old centre and they want changes made. But because the design's been locked down, because the budget's been agreed, it's very difficult to make changes, and you end up in conflict because the individuals are consulted on who've given up their time, as access panel members do, and your comments haven't been taken on board. I think we're between the two of these. The inclusive design process is the same images for engagement and consultation, but you start that at the beginning of the process. So, for example, the pre-app process is that way where you engage at the very beginning. So you're just coming up with the idea before it's finally formulated into a detailed design. And that engagement, consultation, conversation continues throughout the process. So it's, you told us, we listened, here's what we did, and they can prove that in the design. But it's also about being honest as well. So the design team need to be clear on what their available budget is and to manage the expectations of the consultees. And the final image is a happy, smiley baby who's all content, and that's the inclusive design. You won't please all of the people all of the time, but there's a better chance of having less conflict by involving, engaging people along the way in the design journey. If we don't, we end up, and you'll have heard this phrase before, the social model of disability. These were questions that were sent to Mike Oliver, who was an academic in the 1980s, and he very much objected to the questions being focused on him and his health condition. So it was, does your health problem or disability prevent you from going out as often as far as you would like? And he turned that question around in similar questions as well to, what are the environmental constraints which make it difficult for you to get about in your immediate neighbourhood? As if an image of a wheelchair user at the top of a step without a drop curb. So if we don't design properly, if we don't engage, if we don't find out what the barriers are, we either inadvertently build them in or we don't remove them when we're designing new buildings. And I wanted to try and come up with an acronym to sum up access panels. And I came up with KEEN because panels are knowledgeable, eager to engage, eager to educate, and having a group of individuals with varying abilities and a life experience that you all have, it's quite novel. And I think it's such a unique experience, experience that you have that you can bring to the design team. And if they listen to you and involve you and have access to you at the right time in the process. So for example, if your local authority promotes you in the homepage, there's more chance that design teams will find you. If they've never, I'm maybe thinking about the year one architectural student new to the practice and been asked by the design team, go and find stakeholders to engage with. They may not have heard of Disability Equality Scotland, may not have heard of access panels, but if they Google the local website for that area, then they may come across you guys and engage with you. So that was quite I'm aware that we need to stick to time. That was quite a kind of whistle-stop tour. So I'm happy that the final slide is hands in the air with loads and loads of questions. Happy to take comments or questions, whatever you have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Susan. That was really interesting. Does anybody have any questions for Susan? If you've got a wee question, feel free to, you can either pop your hand up, I'm keeping an eye on the participants tab as well, or you can stick it in the chat. No? Nothing? Well, why don't we have a wee comfort break just now? Oh, hold on a wee minute. I've got a wee question. Oh, Marvin.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. That was a really interesting presentation. I really appreciate that today. I was particularly interested in your slide where you had to engage, and then I think it was the design and then consult, that process. Obviously, one of the key messages that we are constantly pushing out to a lot of decision makers in the Scottish Government is to engage with disabled people and access panels at the earliest opportunity. Is there any further advice on how access panels can practically do that without obviously forcing themselves on the doorstep of a local authority or a decision maker? Is there any practical advice that you can give to an access panel on how they can take that forward?
I'd probably just pinch Pam Duncan glances, don't be shy. And a bit like Neil Baldwin, go back to the basics, just ask. Because local authorities are public bodies which have statutory duties within the Equality Act to proactively engage and engage with disabled people. So it's part of their statutory requirements. I think this and taking the opportunity, we've had 2 and a bit years of COVID where things have turned upside down, and this idea to re-engage and just chat the door and wave and say we're still here, we haven't disbanded. Ian's great news, there are more access panels on the go. And so local authorities may well have a new chief executive, they may have a new head of department. So it might be good just a wee introductory letter. The difficult thing is going to be, is the building open? Because I think a lot of buildings are still closed down, but as we emerge, so if the panels are happy to have a life online and have virtual meetings, then just use the COSLA website, you'll get contact details for the different local authorities, or use the existing contacts if you've been lucky enough to still have them, and just say you're still here and you just want to use this opportunity to re-engage. Ideally, if access panels have a history of engaging early and the success story that can have, and I think like a joint case study, if there was a design team they worked with particularly well and they felt it went well, actually ask the design team for a few comments and a few lines, because it halves their workload, because if they get it right and engage early, it's less for them to do as the design evolves, because they've got most of the comments and feedback at the beginning. Oh, things have changed, budgets change and regulations change. But so if panels were able to build a wee case study to prove that it works, because we all know it works, it's trying to convince people that early engagement works and it's beneficial to them as well.
Oh, that's really helpful, thank you. And as the umbrella body, we're aware that many access panels are very independent and autonomous in their own right, which is absolutely correct in its own way. As the umbrella body, we are here to support access panels if they do need that help as well. The reason for me asking for Susan, because there are routes for you to go down as an access panel to speak to decision makers and local authorities individually. But again, if you feel that you need that extra support, by all means come to us as the umbrella body. I would add to that as well, but thank you, Susan. I think I've seen Ken's hand up. Was that right, Ken Johnson?
Yes, thanks.
Hi.
Hi. I just wonder, Susan, now that we have a national application form for planning permission, I wonder if it would be a good idea to maybe incorporate a question in that saying, to what extent has your development made provision for access by disabled people, etc. I know a lot of applicants and architects do that, but I wonder if that was incorporated in the national planning application forum, if then can I highlight it and the architects and designers would then have to address it.
That's a really good point, so that they can't avoid it then. It's actually a specific question to them. The design and access statements that I referred to, some of them are written really, really well, and I've seen some that are written not so well. A lot of designers still really don't understand what a design and access statement is. They think it's about physical access, so it's how you drive into the site, or how you get off the bus and get into the site. Because this word access means so many things to different people. And when I did the search for access panels, it was amazing how much the word access related to outdoors. But that's a really good question and a good point, yeah.
Well, couldn't we maybe put that point to Pam Duncan Glancy on behalf of DES?
Absolutely, Ken. Yeah, that's it. What might be the best thing to do is if you drop that to me in an email, I can then sort of formulate that into the kind of question document, send that on to Pam as part of the follow-up, because we were going to say thank you anyway. But yeah, totally agree, Ken. That's a good idea. Perfect. I think we're going to go to Carolyn Wilson-Smith next, and then we've got Peter Joyce for a wee question after that.
Thanks very much. Just a couple of points, and really around what you've said. I've had personal experience of working with a local authority on two very different bases. One where they've come out and they've engaged and needed input, where they've got to that point in their consultation process that they feel they need to speak to an access panel or whatever. Whilst that's good that they come out, it's usually far too late for them to take on board any great detail that we could give them, as you've said, with regards to budgets, etc. And so I've also worked on the basis where you work very closely with them and get in an awful lot earlier, but it's a completely different sort of relationship. So if your relationship is, I guess, holding the local authority to account, pointing out their holes, I guess also almost wanting to do battle with them, to then switch to a point where you want to work in partnership can take many years to switch that round. And I've had personal experience of seeing both. What we're trying to do in that situation is bring the discussion sooner, so that it is part of that design process much earlier on. I say quite key there is the non-confrontational nature of it, but to support them. I find if you get into sort of a lot of sort of solid confrontation, they'll just state that they've complied with all the regulations and kind of go away. We don't need money for that. And they've just ticked a box. It becomes a tick box. So I guess my point there is the difference in the relationship is key, and relationships the key. The other one, I think the question was asked about how a local councillor who is maybe involved in social care or housing as part of their specialist area. I found working with one of them quite early on, and they will then start to invite you to their meetings in the local authority a bit sooner. So I found that, I just noticed that was one of the things we discussed, but I found that works really well, is speaking to your local councillors, especially now. And of course you've got the pledges as well to discuss with them at the moment. So I think early intervention is really important. And the other thing is, but it's pushing us back towards the confrontational side, is effective use of equality impact assessments. And in actual fact, you'll probably find that the people that are having to do them at the local authority don't like doing them. So the fact that an organisation or some individuals are willing to support them in completing one of those, or is willing to look at a draft or willing to critique or something, so that you're actually offering something that they actually could really do with. I think that works. So my apologies, it was less about questions for Susan and more reiterating some of her points, and just, if that was all right, just explaining some of my own experience of trying to convert our relationship into a genuine collaborative relationship. Many thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thank you. Peter Joyce, I think you had your hand up.
I did have my hand up and I was going to lower it again. Oh, I don't know whether I've disappeared from my camera. I will apologise. I only came in at the tail end, Susan, of your presentation. I was sitting out the back garden in the sunshine and laughing with my magazine. Wonder if the access panel will be interested in a report on how accessible my garden is to the sunshine. And she said, have you not got a DES meeting today? Oh, damn, right, I come racing in. Touching on it when you mentioned about leisure centre, for instance, Susan, and Ian, you know, background to this as well. I'm actually part of the design team for the new one in Ayr with the architects, which is a good way as a Trojan horse and getting in the inside. But there's no access panel in South Ayrshire. I know I was in touch with you, we try to get a few contacts, Susan, but there lies the difficulty, and I was going to say, Ian, are we any closer to getting one? I've managed to bring a few people on board, just individually try to find people in the locality to do it, but there's no formal panel, which does pose difficulties. But we've tried to engage with as many groups related to, the accessibility and inclusivity of it.
Yeah, if you're able to share those details with me, or if those people
Yeah.
that you've been in contact with are happy for the details to be shared with me,
Yeah.
because there's a couple of people from UWS and disabled students who got in touch to say that they're really keen to be part of a new South Ayrshire panel, and I know there's a couple of people down in Girvan as well who would like to take part. So
I know of a couple of them, and yeah, I've got them.
perfect.
At least one of them involved with the North Ayrshire Access Panel.
Right, okay.
To give them
That's
some
something that's obviously, it's easy enough for me to take forward.
Yeah.
You know, I live in South Ayrshire, so
Yeah,
I think that, yeah, we can get the ball rolling on that the next week or so, Peter. That would be ideal.
that'd be great.
Happy to meet you as well if you
Yes.
want to be involved, kind of in the initial setting up.
Yeah.
but
Anything
yeah.
I can do to help. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Peter.
Sorry, Ian, it's Leslie. Can I just interrupt? I don't think Nathan can see me because my laptop kicked me out. So I've been trying to swap with him, but he obviously couldn't see me. So I thought
I can see you now, Leslie. There we go.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay. Does anybody have any further questions or comments? If not, what we can do is we can segue nicely into a wee comfort break for the next 10 minutes or so. And then once we come back, we'll be going into the discussion groups, breakout groups, to talk about what a fairer COVID recovery might look like and how access panels can really be involved in that meaningfully. So if nobody has any further questions, we'll pop out for a wee comfort break just now. And then what time are we on just now? Just gone 3 o'clock. If we could come back maybe for sort of 3:15, does that sound okay, everybody? Yeah? Perfect, okay. Hi everyone. I think that's everybody back through from the breakout groups now. Perfect. Brilliant. Okie dokie. I hope you found that useful. What we'll do is we are running a wee bit ahead of schedule, but that's not uncommon for the Access Panel Conference. What we'll do now is we'll, if I can ask the facilitator from each group just to provide a kind of brief overview of what was discussed, and then the kind of main 3 key asks that we're going to take forward, and what will happen is they'll form part of the kind of summary report, which will go to the Minister, and we'll share that with Pam Duncan Glancy as well. What I've done is I've kind of put together a list of the questions that have arisen for Pam throughout the conference as well. So if anybody else has any kind of questions that they'd like to pass to Pam, let me know and just stick it in the chat, and I can pop them in an email to Pam at the end of the conference. So if we could go to Emma first, and if you could just provide the kind of wider group a wee kind of overview of what was discussed in the 3 key asks, please. Thank you.
Worries. I knew you would come to me first. I'm not prepared.
I thought I'd get it over and done with and out of the way.
Fine. Okay, so in our group we had a conversation about the panels currently and what they're trying to do. Lots of people coming back together again for the first time since the pandemic. Some hybrid working, but a real appetite to come back together. But there are some concerns about safety, concerns about travelling and driving to meet people again, particularly as lateral flow tests are no longer free, which means that people perhaps might not be testing where they would have before, which creates some issues and concerns around safety for people coming together. We felt that in terms of the last 2 years over the pandemic, there has been some gains made for disabled people. There's been some reasonable adjustments put in place to allow people to meet together and to do things differently, whether it's remote working or joining meetings via Zoom. And there is a fear that we'll lose some of those gains as we go forward. So we want to be able to make sure we can keep the things that work for us, but also we don't want to just accept that as a minimum. We have to make sure that people don't just assume that we're at a stage now where disabled people are able to participate. We need to be able to take that as a minimum and build on it. So that means perhaps looking at the way we do things, making sure that reasonable adjustments are in place. And a lot of that is built on equality impact assessments, which we discussed in some detail, in that they have been done, but perhaps not as fully as we would have liked. there's perhaps a way that people are suspecting they know and making decisions without proper consultation. And we felt that that was really important, that disabled people need to be involved in those decision makings. And that if there are any negative impacts that are identified as part of an equality impact assessment, then that needs to be dealt with before things move on. There's no way that an impact assessment should be highlighting any negative effect for any one protected characteristic group and then things progress without that being dealt with. We also felt that perhaps there's a backlog of services, things not being done to address these, and we just want to make sure that nothing goes back to the way it was before and that we build on all of those gains. But in terms of our 3 priorities, we were talking about, first of all, understanding and responding to disabled people's needs has to be a minimum. It's a fundamental before we can move forward. They have to have the ability to engage in the process. So consultation needs to be genuine. It can't just be tokenistic, and it also has to be in a way that disabled people can genuinely engage. And then coming back again to the final point about equality impact assessments, they have to be genuine and done with proper consultation so that people have a chance to engage, and they need to be taken forward in the best possible way. So that's me. You're on mute.
There you go. Susan was talking about that earlier on. You're still on mute. I was still on mute. Thank you, Emma. If we could go to James next, if that's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. And thanks to my group and Access Panel members for their contributions. Covered, some of the themes that Emma mentioned there. I think what was really important for our panel from our discussion was that there has to be meaningful engagement with disabled people, and it was sort of also reflecting on the beginning of the pandemic, and there was direct reference to the Spaces for People programme, and that was an example of where temporary infrastructures were brought in very quickly without any proper equality impact assessment or any real engagement with disabled people, and as a consequence of that, disabled people were actually struggling to go into their local communities. So I think it's just trying to re-educate the councils on meaningful engagement with disabled people and directly with access panels. But we also recognise in the group that it's not just about councils, it's also wider stakeholders, and there's plenty in local communities, like local transport providers. There's also NHS and working with hospitals. There's a long list of different stakeholders that access panels and disabled people can engage with to have a meaningful say. But then in terms of concerns, it was also recognised that it can be quite difficult for the panels to actually find out who is the right person to deal with within these organisations. And I think throughout the pandemic, it's there's been a lot of changes within organisations. So that's also had a result on the people that panels were engaging with directly around accessibility. So a lot of that's changed. So I think it's just trying to keep on top of who is the right person to engage with. But yeah, in terms of meaningful engagement, another area we talked about, and that it came up during the presentations, was around statutory consultee status. That's one way where panels can have direct engagement if it's a requirement, legal requirement. But then we weighed that up against overall capacity for some panels. So panels might not have the capacity to take on that commitment, but we also recognise that actually having statutory consultee status in place would be really meaningful as well in the right circumstances. And I think that sort of led on to also looking at overall capacity of panels and recruitment, and looking at how younger people can be involved in access panels. And so there's going forward to the panels, so there's some sustainability there. Yeah, I'm just looking through my notes. I think that sort of covers a lot of the key points. And online engagement, again, it's kind of come back to what Emma mentioned about there has been some benefits. There was mention of how using Zoom has actually resulted in more meetings taking place and more engagement. And yeah, whether that's actually going to continue when we go down this route of maybe going back to face-to-face meetings or a hybrid approach. So I think it just ultimately it's looking at the benefits of online meetings and whether that can still remain in place, because some panels have benefited from that. Yeah, and then just a final point around sort of looking at what DES can do. Well, as mentioned there, we can help with overall capacity building, but I think also as a national DPO, it's sort of looking at DES taking on some of these issues. So for example, with building standards, the building standards, there's a minimum and then there's best practice that goes beyond the standard, and that's kind of what access panels are trying to promote. But more often than not, planners, designers will just go with the minimum standard. So as a national DPO, DES, that's maybe an issue that DES could look to campaign on a national level. But then it was also looking at the 4 schools of architecture as well. And well, again, DES as a DPO, national DPO, whether that's something that we could use our connections at that sort of national level to take forward as well on behalf of the access panels. Yeah, so lots of points there that I can summarise as well and send back to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, James. Appreciate that. And lastly, could we go to Morven, please?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to my group. We had a really good discussion. It did kind of fleet everywhere and covered all the points that both Emma and James have just raised. So I'll just summarise again with the first question around what can access panels do to ensure a fairer recovery for disabled people. There was a feeling that we're not in a position yet of a recovery phase yet. There's some access panels that some of the members just don't have the confidence yet to meet face to face, and some access panels have taken a hybrid approach or are about to trial a hybrid approach. So we're still in that era, that time phase of just testing out to see what works for the access panel and their members at this moment in time as well. So kind of moving on to the second one, again, there's still a huge lack of confidence in getting back to face-to-face meetings. Email communication seems to work for some access panels too. Surveying local people in their communities. I think South Lanarkshire are about to do that, which is a good way to try and get new members into their access panel. Again, this is one of the biggest problems that was coming across in our group, was the recruitment of members to access panels, and how that post-COVID situation whether that will hamper any efforts to recruit new members as well. We didn't actually get round to, we did talk about statutory consultee status as well. Again, very echoing the comments from what James was saying. There's obviously a desire there for access panels to want the statutory consultee status, but what we ended up talking about later on is about that recognition that even though access panels are given advice to, whether it be local hotels or to a planner, or on planning applications, the access panel's not getting the recognition for the advice that they're given, that they're probably taken forward quite positively. So there does need to be an element of recognition being built in there, and that will probably one of our asks that we never got round to, but I'm summarising that now, sorry. And then early engagement, I think that came across from Emma and James as well. Early engagement is really important. Again, it's not early enough for some planning applications. The access panel needs to be approached probably earlier, just to have initial discussions before a formal application has been put forward. And with regards to that sort of COVID recovery element as well, communications isn't clear enough. There doesn't seem to be even inclusive communication elements built into how we do recover from COVID and come out of this pandemic, and then there's probably a role there for Disability Equality Scotland to support access panels with that. Hopefully I summarised that well for my group. Thank you.
Thank you, Morven. That's great. So as I said previously, what those points will do is they'll form part of the summary report, which is really useful to have that direct feedback from access panels. And that will go back straight to the Scottish Government and will hopefully help inform their kind of fairer recovery plan as well. Annie, I notice your hand's up there.
I think one of the points that was made by one of the groups was the importance of education, and I would really stress as an architect retired myself, the need to press to give teaching to students of architecture and landscape architecture about what inclusive design and designing for people with disability actually means. I've done a little bit myself, but it's mostly amongst trade groups. But really, architecture schools need to have this so importantly, because every day when I walk around the environment of Edinburgh, I see something that doesn't work well, but is perhaps even a new design. And you think, oh my goodness, will they never learn? So I think that's a very important aspect of what we could really do to help, and also get our names out there too, if it was possible.
No, that's a really good point. I think that engaging with architects at the beginning, not
Yeah.
even the beginning of a design, but the beginning of their education, is a really important thing that access panels can do, and that's something that we can help with as well at Disability Scotland. Absolutely.
Good.
So it's not just that your feedback today will just go back to the Scottish Government and it will be forgotten about. We will also use that feedback to kind of form our plan for the next year or so. So thank you for that. Thanks everybody. That was really important. So we are a wee bit ahead of time, but the next up on the agenda is looking at those kind of access panel updates and sort of handing it over to you and looking at what is it that you and your access panel have done over the last year. Is there any knowledge that you want to share with other access panels that are here today? Anything that worked well or anything that didn't work well that you've maybe learned from and can share today? So feel free to sort of pop your hand up in the chat or on the screen, and I can come to you if there's a wee update that you want to provide to panels. We can go straight to you. This is the part where nobody puts their hand up. How about John, I see you've got your hand up there. John Ballantyne. You're on mute, John. Jenny, will we come to you first? Oh no, John's there. It's working.
Hello. Yes, I haven't said much so far because I've got a urinary infection and I didn't sleep much last night, so I'm feeling very tired today. But I've been listening to all the comments, and my access panel has been extremely busy. Annie Pollock, who's taken part in this meeting today, is one of the busiest members of the panel. I'm not all that busy. I chair panel meetings, but I'm aware the panel does a great deal of work, and we found that in the lockdown almost everything has gone online. It's almost impossible to get a face-to-face meeting with anybody. We effectively left to use whatever platform the organisers of the event or the meeting have. Most of the time, the council will only use Microsoft Teams. Other organisations will use Zoom or something else. They all have advantages or disadvantages. And unfortunately, there always are a number of disabled people who can't manage technology or can't take part in these kind of events, or people who are blind or partially sighted are only able to join by telephone. So effectively, although technology is useful, and although yes, it does help, it doesn't solve everything, and you still have got to try and keep in touch with all your members. And I know that people are missing face-to-face meetings. It's now over 2 years since my access panel had a face-to-face meeting. And we literally don't know when we'll be able to have a face-to-face meeting again, because that decision really depends on the council inviting us back into their building.
I don't know if there's any other access panels that have maybe had experience of this. If you, maybe used the council buildings previously, but have then looked at maybe kind of a private church hall or something like that, renting that instead. Jenny?
Yeah, we use the church hall in Inverurie, and we always have done. And so we are hoping to have a face-to-face or possibly hybrid meeting next time we meet. But there was 2 points I wanted to say. We've been very busy, and we did manage to do a proper visit, real visit, to our new academy and community facility that we have in Inverurie that's been built and finished off during the pandemic. And we managed to go and meet with all sorts of very relevant people and have a good look round and make useful suggestions, and also form a relationship with the people who are involved in running those two really central facilities to our town. But my other point was a word of caution about technology. Again, double-edged sword that it is. We've had some issues with Facebook, that people post things on the Access Panel pages that maybe would have been better posted in a private Facebook page. And yes, while it's great to have open discussions and so on and so forth, it can lead to problems, and it's something as access panels become more active on Facebook, possibly, that we need to watch out for.
A good point, Jenny. And we do actually have a closed Facebook group for the Access Panel network. So if you're a member of an Access Panel, you can join that, and there's an opportunity for discussion there.
Okay.
But I know what you're talking about. You know, social media can lead to
yeah, it can be good, but
arguments, debates, maybe sometimes nastiness, but we hopefully avoid that. Peter, I'll come to you.
I'll put the apologies in now for about the next 60 seconds, because 3 grandkids are arriving in from school.
Oh, no.
And they're about to pass my room door. And while I say to them, right, straight through and quiet, please.
They won't be.
Yeah, we'll get, oh, they will behave. It's okay. Maggie, my wife's there, she'll have threatened them enough. That they'll just get the long suffering. Yeah. One of the things, one thing is my camera. I don't have my camera shot, or am I away? Or
I can see you, Peter.
That is the panel, the way it's looking at this end. Yeah, one of the issues, or some of the developments we've still been dealing with, and we've had walking meal assessments. There's a lot of work going on in our area down at Rawson with new secondary schools, primary school, swim facilities, etc. is going through the process at the moment on plan, but also, and I'll probably swear here, about shared surfaces, etc. Floating bus stops. A lot of engagement with Sustrans on cycle lanes through our Drawson town centre. A lot of negativity from a lot of the local people, businesses, etc., that feels it's going to make it worse. Parking, not being able to park right outside places because of cycle lanes, etc. It's going through. So yeah, we've been trying to play devil's advocate and come up, rather than just being totally negative, come up with possible solutions for the problems surrounding cycle lanes in particular. Sustrans, we're arranging a meeting with ourselves and some others, NARI and IB, etc., in Glasgow for some of the areas Sustrans believes may work or not. So this is an area, this is an issue, no doubt. If you've not had it in your area now, it's coming your way soon. So yeah, we're working with them to see if we can come up with something that would make it work. So that's been a lot of the consultations about the money. We welcome the investment that will come with it to improve the pavements, the roads, and the surrounding area, because there's quite a lot of money being spent on the new secondary school complex, etc., and then down into the harbour itself. If they can get these 2 ferries sorted out eventually for their Drawson Brodick crossing. but yeah, that's been our main piece of work during this, is surrounding all this cycle lane development, etc., down our Rawson Way. So we'll see what they come up with, and hopefully a meeting they're trying to arrange in May. And it'd be interesting to hear what others have experienced if they've been dealing with this similarly.
Great, thank you very much, Peter. Really interesting update. Morven, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for your update there as well, Peter. Actually, it's amazing when you come to the Access Panel conference, you hear about all the fantastic work that you're all doing and how busy, especially how busy you've been during this time, at a time that's been challenging for everybody. But then when we put requests out to Access Panels, what have you been doing? Let us share that news in our next magazine. We get zilch from you. So what would be really good is if we can get some information from you so we can publish it, share it with our members. Our membership has doubled over the last 2 years with organisations and individuals. We are obviously connected with ministers and MSPs and local authorities. We want to help you. We want to share the good work that you're doing. So like you're saying there, Peter, the work that you're doing around the cycle lanes, and of course a lot of them came up unexpectedly at the beginning of the pandemic, and it caused a whole host of issues as well. And it's amazing that you're involved in that piece of work, especially with Sustrans, and giving your advice. It'd be good to get just a wee article from you just about what that involvement has entailed, what advice you've given.
Ali's aware of it. I think Ian, you may be aware. Maybe I've CC'd in a couple of emails when someone had contacted Des. I believe Des is getting an invitation to this event too. I think, yeah, we certainly would, because they asked one of, is there anyone else or any other group that you think would be useful to attend? And yeah, there's obviously one of, well, no doubt the guys at Glasgow Access Panel. I've given them a heads up because I've sort of got one foot in the camp and attend their meetings quite often. And we've certainly had a few consultations online during the time with Sustrans, which we generally shoot them down in flames. Yeah. But this is happening. There's a difficult one to get around it.
Yeah, I know it's been ongoing for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, one interesting one that did come about, of course, with the change to the highway code, which gave priority rights to pedestrians and cyclists. So if they've got priority rights for cyclists, why do we need cycle lanes? They can use the lanes. Yeah. That was one of, that's a goodie. So we'll see how it goes about. But
and it's also gone back to the presentation by Susan earlier, and obviously that recognition element. Ask to be recognised for the advice that you're given, and make sure that you are recognised for giving that advice and getting those changes made as well. I think that's such an important element that's come out for me today, is making sure that access panels are recognised.
Part of that whole consultation, the three bodies that were involved, the Sustrans, there's another disability forum in Ardrossan specifically, and North Ayrshire Council. So they are part of the three part of the proposals around this thing. So we've come in as advisors with some others, and widening the consultation.
Excellent. So I'll ask James to get in touch with you for more information.
Yes.
He's got a simple template that you can use that makes it easier to get information.
Yeah, we'll put it together.
And our next open door issue is transport themed as well, so it was fitting really nicely. And just before I finish up and let Linda come in, I know that from my group as well with South Aberdeenshire and Central Aberdeenshire, you're saying that you are doing joint hybrid or joint meetings, Zoom meetings together. Again, it'd be really good to hear how that's working with another access panel as well, and just even a little case study around how that came about and how that meeting style is working for you going forward as well, and how it will change, and anything from any other access panel that you feel that you want to share with us. And it's not just with us, it's with our members, it's with ministers, it's with local authorities. We want to hear please just get in touch with us at any time. So I'm going to stop ranting and I'm going to let Linda come in now.
Thanks, Morgan. How to follow up after your rant? I was actually hoping I could just monopolise Peter while I had him here. You mentioned about some of the discussions with Sustrans, and I don't think that's uncommon for us to be hearing that feedback. I suppose I was just wondering if, when you raise the issues with them, how receptive are they to either earlier engagement or making the changes that are needed to make things accessible for all?
I would say, considering over the years, Sustrans consultation with them was usually negative in a fight. The couple of people that have been involved from Sustrans and over the last 2 years, I would say, do consider what we've said, taken on board. There was there's a situation where we can see the merits of the floating bus stop or a bus stop separate. In that it takes away a lot of people on the pavement and you struggle to get by them at busy times, and they're all on the pavement and they're moving it over. One of the biggest issues we have with the floating bus stop proposal now is a double cycle lane you've got to cross. So you're going to be trying to look both ways, etc. The latest one we have put with them, and they're going to get their engineers to look at, is having a mini controlled crossing. So if controlled crossings at junctions are good for people, and this is mainly with people who are blind or visually impaired, sight loss, the biggest fear for them is stepping out on it. If you've got a standard controlled crossing at a junction, then if you put a mini one, again, with all the lights, the stoppers, and we've even suggested a gate that closes over or whatever, they're going back to ask their engineers about the feasibility of it. Because if you then have a closed gate and cross into a floating bus stop, we think that's a reasonable proposal to consider and see how others who are blind and partially sighted think, okay, that's pretty safe. Can it then work? So it's one of the ones, but they have been good in the consultation and engagement and the walk wheel assessments we've done with them. So in a way, if it's going to happen, you got to work with people rather than work against just negative. And we don't pull our punches when we say we don't like this. They get told. So yeah, it's been going on the 2 years. So let's see what comes in the next couple of months, because it's all coming to a head now. We're going to go and look elsewhere with them, take their invitation. They'll provide all the transport, the meeting facilities, or the costs to them. And they have asked, is there anybody other groups elsewhere you could think should be in this, or being in the meeting maybe in Glasgow in the areas that they think that things are not bad, and then we'll take it from there. So at least there is meaningful consultation going on.
Thanks, Peter, much appreciated.
Yeah.
Anne Farrow, come to you just now, and then we'll go to John Ballantyne after that. Oh, Anne, you're on mute. That's okay. Is that you?
Right. Sorry. Dundee Access Group has had a lot of engagement with Sustrans about cycle lanes, and they really have been trying hard to have contact with us and consult with us and to make things as safe as they possibly can. So I would say our reaction with them has been positive.
Good to hear. I'm glad you've had a positive reaction with them. Come to John Ballantyne next, and then Ken Johnston.
Edinburgh Access Panel have had some dealings with Sustrans. Our Edinburgh Access Panel have had various dealings with Sustrans. Our experience of Sustrans has been we have not liked any criticism of their proposals, and they've not been all that easy to deal with. But needless to say, we will deal with any organisation who effectively approach us or we have to get in touch with, because Sustrans have got money from the Scottish Government, and therefore we have to deal with them.
Okay. I'm sensing there's a real mixed bag here across the Access Panel network in terms of when you engage with Sustrans. Some have a good experience, some have a bad experience. Ken, I'll come to you. I don't know if this is going to be Sustrans related. Doesn't have to be, but
well, on behalf of the Oban and North Argyll panel, we've had a good year with good, well-attended meetings with members and also advisors. One of our members is also the chair lady of the Oban Council, so obviously we've got a bit of impact there. We've had all our meetings on Zoom, and that's allowed us to go to Mull and to Taynuilt and a lot of the rural parts of North Argyll. We've had a good liaison with the planner as we audited and commented on 59 cases, and we've had good responses. We're also working on a national campaign along with yourselves, Ian, to get a Braille labelling on all the goods that are in the shops and supermarkets, etc. We've also been working with Ali and Des to set up other panels in the Argyllshire area, and we've now succeeded in creating a panel in Helensburgh, the panel. We had an hour's session with the brilliant Susan Fulton, which I think we really benefited from. She gave us that for free. Out of that, we're now thinking we could have a workshop with the local architects and designers in the Oban area, and we're hoping to set that up fairly quickly. We've got a quote for doing it from Susan Fulton, and we'll be asking yourselves, hopefully, if you can maybe help us to actually fund that. So we've had quite an active year. Thank you.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you very much, Ken. And just as an aside, if anybody else would like to have Susan along to their Access Panel for her to give a wee presentation, a wee update, wee workshop, get in touch with me and I can pass your details to her. Who was I coming to next? I saw somebody's hand. Charles, that was it. Sorry, I saw your hand up there, Charles. You're next.
Right, that's lovely. At Disabilities 5, what we've been doing is quite varied. So we've been having meetings, sometimes 2 a month, but with different types of meetings. The first meeting was a straightforward Access Panel meeting, and we talk about Access Panel issues. But the one that actually got the most interest was our themed meeting, which was more of a social, and people from the outside to come in and talk about disability issues and access panel issues. And that actually got people from outside of the organisation and stakeholders from councils, etc., to actually come along and have a chat about things. They went very well. We also involved in looking at the pedestrianisation issues that surrounded Dunfermline and Kirkcaldy. They were closing off some of the areas, which then made it difficult for people to access it during the day or disabled, specifically in the morning, because most of our members or people involved who are disabled find it difficult to get into the towns before 11 o'clock. And they were closing off the pedestrian areas at 11 a.m. Additionally, we've been looking at Burnt Island Football Club, and did an Access Panel audit of their premises. And we've done other bits and pieces throughout the year. So we've been busyish despite COVID, and trying to carry on what we're doing in the best way possible. And I know you might know of Chair Vice David. He came to one of our AGMs pre-COVID, and he collapsed. And after that, that was at the point he put in his retirement. So he's now retired from Disabilities 5. So our numbers are slightly diminishing, but we're trying to resolve that issue. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. And wish David well as well. I'm sure everybody else will join me in that too. Does anybody else have any further updates that they'd like to give? I hope I've not missed anybody. I don't see any hands up. Oh, Arthur, yep.
Yeah, in the Low Harbour Disability Access Panel has been very active in the period since your last conference. We did over 123 planning application comments. We have had several Zoom meetings with various architects and applicants. We are involved in the new Belford Hospital being based in Fulton, Scotland. We actually did a route walk along the full length of the trunk road going through Fort William, where they've agreed that the drop curbs are not fit for purpose. And we've been informed lately there is funding to address this. We were, this time last year, we were able to go and visit Ardnamurchan Lighthouse, the most westerly point in the British Isles, to do a site visit. We've helped them with funding applications as well, which they've been able to get. And as like everybody else, we have been struggling because of COVID, but we are still a very active panel. Thanking you.
Thank you very much, Arthur. That was really interesting to hear. Is there anybody else? John, you've still got your hand up.
Yes.
Oh, you've muted yourself, John. John, you're on mute. John.
Again, Edinburgh Access Panel has been involved in a lot of consultations, particularly consultations organised by organisations such as the City Council, Network Rail, ScotRail, etc. Because we've quite a lot of involvement with Edinburgh Waverley Station, which is very important because it happens to be a transport hub for the whole of east of Scotland. We found that in the lockdown, almost everything has gone online. So we are constantly asked to go to online meetings, and that means we are very busy. We've also had a great deal of involvement in the Spaces for People project, where we responded to numerous proposals. I think at one stage we'd responded to something like 140 proposals in the Spaces for People project. So we've been very busy doing a lot of things, and we've tried to influence our organisations where we can.
Thank you, John. That's great to hear. If there isn't anyone with kind of any further updates, then oh, I'm sorry, I do need to just nip out briefly. Sorry, could I possibly pass over to you, Morven, if that's okay? I think we're just going to wrap up.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks, Ian. So it's the same, when you're working from home, there's always a delivery at the door, isn't there? So apologies about that, everyone. Yeah, if no one else has any further updates or questions, again, we're more than happy to answer any questions as the umbrella body for the Access Panel Network also. Any suggestions or any proposals that you wish for us to take forward are more than welcome to. You know, you can always email myself and Ian at any time. Have an open door policy. Please contact us at any time if you have any questions or proposals you want to take forward with us. We are here to support you. Please don't forget that. We have a range of resources. We're currently developing our Access Panel Network website. I mentioned that earlier. And there will be a new handbook published on the website as well. This information is also available in alternative formats for any of your members too. So please, again, please get in touch if you do request any information from us. But again, I see that Ian's back. So again, from me, it's been really lovely meeting you all again today and getting the opportunity to speak to some access panels directly as well. And again, I'm blown away by the amount of work that all of you have been undertaking during this time. Again, the last year, I know we've been in a pandemic for 2 years now. I don't think the last year has been any easier than the first year. And again, as we're coming out of the pandemic, the recovery is just going to be as difficult as many of you have expressed concerns about. So again, we're here to support you in any way we can. I'd just like to wish you, obviously, all keep well, and really nice to meet you all again today. And I'll let Ian close today's Access Panel conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom.
Ian, just before you go, just a quick question if you can. Did we ever get anywhere with Des getting represented on the British standard for BSH 300?
No, we didn't. That was a couple of years ago. I think,
yeah,
that we wanted some sort of representation on the British standards.
Yeah.
It's something that we can follow up with again. I think at the time, we weren't in a kind of great place when that came along, Peter, if you know what I mean. But it's something that we can definitely kind of follow up with again and look at.
Yeah, I know we had a conversation about it. It would be good. With the number of people and areas you're representing.
That's something I can speak to you about, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. But yeah, just quickly, sort of to echo what Morven was saying, it's been lovely to see you all here again and to hear from Access Panels directly in terms of what you've been up to. It's I say this every year, but I'm amazed at the amount of work that you do, and you give your time selflessly to help improve your local communities. So it's just it's fantastic to see you all here, and who knows, next year it might be a hybrid format. We might be back together again in one room in some sort of hybrid format. I don't think we would go for the full Access Panel conference either kind of just in a physical location and no hybrids offered, but it might be the possibility that we might actually get to see you all face to face at some point, hopefully over the next year or so. But yeah, just thank you from everybody at DES as well for taking time out to come along today. I hope you've got something from it. I know I have. So it's now my job to go away and produce the summary report, which you should hopefully all have within the next couple of weeks. But as always, if there's anything that DES can help with, please, you know where we are. Drop me an email, give me a call. I'm always here to support as well. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you again to everybody, and thank you to the captioner and the BSL support as well today too. Thank you.
Thanks, Bye.
Thanks everyone.
Bye everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.